Grow CFO is where finance leaders grow together. Join thousands of like-minded professionals using Grow CFO to access the combined knowledge and experience of the finance leader community. You can join us today, growcfo.net. Hello and welcome to the Grow CFO Show. I'm your host, Kevin Appleby, and today I've got with me Krishna Dunthoori from Apty. And we're going to be talking about why ERP implementations go wrong. And I dare say that will lead us into the subject of why Apty can help you get them right. So, Krishna, welcome to the Grow CFO Show.
Thank you, Kevin. Happy to be here.
Krishna, Apty, what does it do?
All right. So Apty is a digital adoption platform. In simple words, we help enterprise companies get better results from their ERP implementations or any complex enterprise softwares where they spend a lot of money and effort, but at the end of the day, they get very little usage out of it. And Apty provides a very simple, streamlined solution for their end users where we go in, we sit on top of these enterprise applications and help with end user adoption. For example, let's say you take a Oracle ERP implementation for a large manufacturing company. They might have 10,000, 15,000 users. In traditional ways, they have to train all those users, make sure those users really understand how all complex processes work in the system, and also take care of a lot of support, change management, and all. A software like Apty can really change all of that and can provide a very simple overlaid solution for these ERPs, or as a matter of fact, any web application out there to help improve the adoption, help improve user onboarding, like a GPS in a car.
I guess the underlying question to that is, well, fine, if you need something like that, there must be a lot of ERP implementations that are going wrong.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And there are quite a lot of studies, Kevin, that have been done. And obviously, the biggest one that you can follow is Gartner's study that has come out recently that says almost 50% or more of ERP implementations usually fail. And if you put that in perspective, considering the fact that there's about $400 billion worth of ERPs implementation that go on an annual basis, that's a staggering $200 billion worth of ERP implementations that are not seeing the light at the end of the tunnel, right? And we obviously are talking about ERPs, but if you think about the problem of enterprise software not yielding the results, it's quite common in large companies where a lot of effort goes into implementing these softwares, very little value outcome at the end of the day.
That's interesting. In the early 2000s, I was part of PwC Consulting, and we were working in reaction to a similar Gartner report that was talking about ERP failing to deliver its benefits. And at that point, we started putting together a benefits realization methodology around implementing a system. It really had nothing to do with the system itself. It had plenty to do with setting objectives beforehand, setting metrics to measure against those objectives, and holding people accountable for delivering them. A little bit like effectively we adapted the balanced scorecard methodology to the ERP implementation. I think you're touching on the way change management's done, the way training's done, aren't you?
Yes.
What do you think the issues are that are really underlying this poor success rate?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you actually think about it, there's probably a number of reasons why any enterprise software, particularly we're talking about ERPs here, why the ERP implementations would fail, right? But one of the biggest study that actually came out was pinpointing to, let's say, top 3-4 reasons. And interestingly enough, one of the biggest reasons why ERP implementations fail comes down to simple basic human psychology, right? Whether ERP software is being introduced for the very first time, or if the company is acquired and employees are now expected to use it. And there's often a cultural resistance, right? So now all of a sudden, now there's an expectation that every employee must follow a process in a very sophisticated and complex system. And everything that they know and have been used to how they've been doing things now must go through a very sophisticated and then sometimes very complex system. Now, a simple truth lies at the heart of human resistance, if you think about it, right? So because we all hardwired to a consistency and a routine, and whatever you were doing, whether it was efficient or not, you just don't want that to be changed. Now, ERPs come with, in a way, a lot of discipline, right? And it's an ocean when you think about what an ERP can do. And any individual employee of a large organization, sometimes depending on their role, will have a very small, role to play in the ERP and a large role to play in the ERP. And our brains are naturally circuited for efficiency and they prefer predictability and all. But when this huge change is thrown your way, yes, sometimes training will help, but your training is only as good as maybe the first 30 days or sometimes first 60 days. And after that, you definitely need a continuous learning mechanism, if you will, or something that can tell you how to do things and stuff. So again, particularly in the context of ERP, given the complexity, given the sophistication, or given the size of these implementations, it really comes down to resistance to change management, right? And that's one of the biggest barrier for a ERP failure. As a matter of fact, any big initiative when you think about pushing new technology or new software to users.
Yeah, and people are used to the way things get done. They're in their comfort zone. They know how to do things. And within Grow CFO, we've done many workshops on change management and put the change curve up that shows how people start in a reasonably good place. They go through denial when the change might have been announced, but nothing's happened. And then they go down the slippery slope, right down into the valley of despair, when everything they want to do has to be done in a different way. And I know certainly when I've been involved in implementations, there's been a lot of communication around the start of the go live. There's been a lot of training around that period, but that probably doesn't go on for a long enough period to really get people back into their comfort zones. Would you say that's generally true of what you've seen?
Yes, absolutely. So a little bit about, if we look at our own journey back, why we are solving the problem we are solving is because we were actually living through this problem by ourselves. Prior to starting Apty, the current company that I'm running for the past 4.5 years, I used to run a boutique service integrator, which was specialized basically in implementing enterprise software. And I've done that for about 7-8 years. And we were fortunate enough to engage with about 400 different companies worldwide. And if there's one thing that I learned through that experience, Kevin, was it didn't really matter how well the software implementation was done or how sophisticated the software was and how well the training was done at the time of go live and all. It was just a matter of time where somebody in the stakeholder group started feeling that we are not really getting any value from our investment here. And what they were really talking about is, hey, we spent a lot of time and energy in implementing this software, and we did everything per the book. We trained everyone. We created the support ecosystem and all that. Then why things are not working, right? Everybody should know what they're doing. The processes are laid out, and everybody should come and just do what they're supposed to do. Again, it goes back to the same simple basic thing. It's human psychology and human resistance to change. And also this constant reminder to the users how things should be done at any given point of time, because circumstances change, changes come, processes change, and configurations change and all that stuff. So training is good. I mean, the traditional training, is good. It helps you start the engine if you think about it. But more often than not, what we have observed, Kevin, was the initial training was only effective for the first few months to, even if you actually go back within a month, 2 months, there was a need for us to go back and retrain some of the users. And that's when we started really thinking there has to be a better way where we can keep this user engagement up and take it to a level where it's required by the ERPs or by the enterprise software to be success. And then we started defining, to your point, what is the benefit realization? What are those success metrics? And when do we say that our enterprise software is now successfully implemented? So you got to have a certain user engagement, and you want to make sure that users are completing the tasks that you expect them to complete and taking lesser time and not depending too much on training and less dependency on support and all. So we started basically building that framework. And that's when it really occurred to us that The only way you can do that is by not doing the traditional onboarding, not doing the traditional training, and not depending on the traditional methods. And that's how we basically came up with the digital adoption platform.
That's really interesting. And I suppose it also affirms something that I've thought for a long time. And what would we typically do when we train a team into a new system? We'd take them into a kind of classroom environment. We'd sit them down in front of terminals. We'd run them through exercises. It would all very much be done in a learning style, not untypical of how you'd put a lesson together at school. Now, I know for a fact, I don't learn that way, particularly when it comes to IT systems. And I absolutely love fiddling about with new tech. I'll do it by, I wonder what happens if I try that. I've got a specific problem, and then go and work out how to do it. And it's only when I've got that specific problem or that specific need to do something actually sitting right there in front of me at the time that any of the learning of how to solve it actually sinks in.
Absolutely. You are touching up a very important point that we often talk to the CIOs and the CTOs and the L&D heads when we talk to our customers and stuff. And sometimes it amazes me. And here we are in 2024. And even now, trust me when I say this, that there are companies that are absolutely doing the same things that they were doing in 2005 and 2006 in terms of how do they train the users. Obviously, COVID changed a little bit that they're not really flying people across the country to make them sit in a 3-day training or a 7-day corporate training. The same thing is now moved to Zoom, right? Or Teams or something else. But they're absolutely doing the same things where they themselves say, you know what? We feel like 70-80% of the users are not engaged with our training at all. And we were like, it's not your... Exactly. It's not your feeling.
About how to do stuff that they haven't even tried to do yet.
Exactly. And there lies the problem, right? That it's like one prescription fits all type of method or type of engagement that some of these large companies or some of these L&D teams want to take. And the reality is learning is so personal, right? Especially adults learn by doing. Adults don't necessarily learn by going to school. And there's a reason why we are done with the school, right? We have done what we have to do. And then now we are working professionals. And the way we learn things are by actually experiencing, right? To your point, hey, this is how, for example, I need to create a record, update a record, or do something in the system, but there's probably 3 other different ways I can get to the same results, or there's probably a way that I can expedite how I interact with the system on a daily basis. And therefore, creating the environment where every end user in our context here, right? So every employee or every end user who is supposed to be using this system, where the way they engage with any of the software applications and the way they complete their day-to-day tasks and the way they engage with the systems to get the results that we are expecting them to get, if we can create an environment where all of this can be personalized, and that's really at the core of what we do. But if you can get them to experience the personalization, that's when we really saw results that were like going in the upward trajectory, right? So because if you create an environment for the end users where they can do self-learning, self-onboarding, and at the same time, you have enough metrics where you are seeing, okay, these are the places where the adoption is failing, right? Or these are the areas where the users are struggling, or these are the processes that are complex and confusing to users. So you have those insights. And when you have those insights, you're not just, again, getting them into a Zoom training for 2 days and giving one solution that fits everyone. Instead, you are actually now preparing a solution using a DAB platform, and that actually personalizes that experience for the end user. So if somebody in Germany is struggling to get the invoices approved on time, then your solution should really solve the problem for the users in Germany. There's no need for you to pull everybody from across the world and have them go through the training again on how to review and approve invoices. So I hope that makes sense.
That makes a lot of sense. So I know certainly I'd be guilty as a consultant or in a change process of saying, well, there's a bit of a box ticking exercise going on here. We produce a training needs analysis. We work out what training needs to be given to who. We set the training sessions up. We get the people through the training sessions. Great, we've done it. Tick, 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 tick. There's a process. And you're right. That process probably hasn't changed for 25 plus years. So I think what you're talking about here, Krishna, is quite revolutionary. Tell me a little bit more about how this actually works in practice.
Sure. So the technology at its core is pretty simple, right, Kevin? If you think about it, DAP, or as it stands for Digital Adoption Platform, is a very simple technology solution which essentially sits as a layer on top of any of the existing applications. So obviously we talked about ERPs, but the same can be true for any of the web application. Again, not getting too technical or your audience here. So think of it's like a film on a glass. So you basically put a film on the glass. You can still see through the glass. You get all the benefits of having a glass there. But at the same time, now you have the protection of the film on top of it. So similarly, the way these DAP platforms work is we don't have to go through the hard integration of working with those ERPs and ERP vendors or big software vendors where getting their approvals for backend integration and all takes forever, and security issues and all that. So simply put, we sit at the browser level. We sit as an overlay on top of any of these web applications. And now we are basically giving the user experience to the end user, and it's completely transparent to the user. So let's say you are a Salesforce user in this case, or a Workday user. You won't feel anything different than what you were doing yesterday. So you come in, you log into your Workday, everything is the same. You go through the same authentication process and everything. And now, at best, the only thing that you would see is you probably would see Apty as a small icon somewhere on the screen that says, hey, do you need any help? Or sometimes if your organization wants you to be aware of any process change or something like that, when you log into your Workday on that morning, you might see a pop-up coming and saying, Kevin, how is your day? We have changed our leave approval policy for managers in your department. Let's see what's the new process is. So now what we're doing is we are bringing a little bit of a personalization. So if that change is only impacting your team and your organization, Kevin, there's no need for us to bother anybody else in the organization. So unlike sending the memos to everyone or having everybody go through the training. So from that experience, you simply, okay, all right, let me see what the new change is. And then we can literally walk you through step by step, screen by screen, as if we are giving you a turn-by-turn directions when you're driving in a new place, right? So it will take you, will show you, and then you're familiar with the new changes and how to review and approve leave applications for your team and stuff, right? Now, the beauty about this is not a one-time done thing. So let's say some of your team members, a couple of team members who may be on vacation and came back after a couple of weeks. And usually what happens in traditional sense is, oh, we missed that memo. Oh, yeah. What do we need to do? Maybe they have to ask a colleague, or they have to ask you, or send in a question to a support or something like that. And given how hybrid and remote work environment these days is, you no longer have that shoulder that you usually can tap and say, hey, Joe, what's going on? I heard about some policy change or something like that. In this case, we're all working remotely, right? So you don't even have that luxury. You have to, Teams or Slack them sometime to know what's going on. So we can take care of all of that too, right? So your team member, when the team members comes in and logs in, they get their own personal message. In that case, hey, Joe, whatever it is that, hey, Jim, this is this policy change. Let me show you what the policy change is, right? So maybe the things that are applicable to your team member are different from what they're applicable to you. So regardless, the whole act of personalization we're talking about, this all can be done through our solution, not only for initial onboarding, for ongoing training, for change management, for basically giving them the support and everything right there at the time when they actually need it. It's available to you on the screen. And the best thing is all of this can be done fairly with no technical criticality involved. So it can be done by the business users. So that's the beauty of the solution that we're bringing.
I like that, Krishna, because certainly one of the things that we perhaps have done on an implementation assignment in the past is rather than train everybody, we would train the trainers. and we'd get within the client a small group of power users whose responsibility was to support everybody else. Now,
Champion users, yeah.
champion users. Now, just moving forward into the remote workplace, then your champion users are going to cease being effective, aren't they? Because they're just not there. They're not walking the floor anymore because there's no floor to walk.
Exactly.
Yeah, I can see there that something that is personalized to the user comes up when the user's ready for it and not the day you decide to run the training or send a memo out. I can see a huge power in that.
Absolutely. And what this does, and again, this is all proven by data with our customers who have applications where they have implemented DAP and who have applications where they have not implemented DAP. So side by side, we have done multiple type comparison, what it takes to onboard a user or a group of users rather to a system using the traditional methods and how effective that onboarding and training is versus how effective if you have a DAP enabled on a system. And the results were like staggeringly different. So obviously, if you look at the metrics of how quickly you can onboard a user using a DAP, or as a matter of fact, anything that you can do that actually brings the personalization and use the digital technology, right? Again, after all, we are in 2024, and there's absolutely a zero expectation should be there from any of the companies that if they can still think they can get by using, to your point, Kevin, 20-year-old training and onboarding technologies or methodologies that they've been using, right? So they're obsolete, they're ineffective, they're gone, they're only costing them more and costing their productivity and stuff. So when we went to these companies and when we started really making these changes in terms of how they can actually take advantage of a DAP to control their change management and to make sure that their adoption is going high. Another important aspect of this, Kevin, is a lot of times when you think of traditional training or onboarding methods, or when you talk to a CIO or as a matter of fact, CFO in your role as well, hey, we are spending so much in these softwares, we're spending so much in these technologies. What are we getting back for it, right? How do we actually measure? How do we measure the success or the ROI back on the big software spending? Sure enough, you must have seen in your role a lot of ROI calculations are done at the time of vendor selection, right? So if we implement an ERP or a HCM, it's going to streamline our processes and this and that. But the reality is, everybody forgets about it. The implementation gets done, training gets done, and there's really very little measure of how they're actually getting value because it's pretty clear in most of the cases that they're not getting any value. There's no usage of those systems. So nobody wants to poke that bear saying, I can go measure the value because there's no measure.
This is the particular bear that we were trying to poke way back 20 years ago in PwC Consulting. Exactly that problem. We've got a business case here that says this system has got an ROI of whatever it is. But we know in practice, in nearly every organization that implements, they get a different ROI. It's never more, it's always less. So
exactly.
What do you do about it? Now, a lot of our thinking back at that time was, well, wait a minute. Whenever we see an ERP system being implemented, it is always a big, complex implementation. We estimate the amount of resource that this implementation is going to take, and it will always suck in more resource. No matter how much resource we throw at this, it's never going to be enough. We also know that we'll hit problems as we go along. We'll hit interfaces that don't work the way they're supposed to. We'll hit all sorts of problems when we're testing. And we'll get really wrapped up in just the process of making the system work the way the system's supposed to work. Then we'll go live. Okay, we might have some real problems as we go live. We might still be fixing stuff, putting things right. But we get to a point that we take a great big deep breath and say, we've done that. Tick, it works. But what we've put the tick in is the system technically works. Technically, it does the same stuff.
Exactly.
We've forgotten entirely about why did we implement it in the first place? What were these benefits that we wanted to get out of the system?
Yep. And that's a classic problem, right? That's a classic problem that CFOs face today. That's a classic problem that CIOs and CTOs face today. And especially post COVID in the current economic arena that we are in, the macro conditions are forcing the senior executive leadership to take a second look at what real benefits or value they're getting. Because during the COVID, magically there was so much capital available. Money was literally free for the companies. So there's a lot of companies went and implemented a whole bunch of new technologies, new software. Some were need, some were probably not the right need, but everybody went crazy in buying the abundance of software because software is abundantly available now. So 20 years before, if you think about it, when SaaS was like just getting started, the companies still were going through the traditional methods of buying the software. So not every group was getting whatever this technology that they wanted. But really now, the companies have made it so easy for a small user group within a large company can now go and just simply subscribe themselves to an enterprise level software and then just start using it. So we quickly went from SaaS adoption to probably SaaS overload, right? There's way too much software out there now, way too many applications with very little usage and very little value in return. And that's a huge problem, right? So now that, again, we are getting into the situation where we need to take a harder look at the capital we are spending. We need to take a harder look at the ROI we are getting with our spending and all, and particularly for CFOs and CTOs and CIOs. This has become quite a lot of headache to really understand what value they're getting from any of the technologies that they have implemented. And when we work with some of the companies, larger companies, Kevin, we often get asked, hey, how do you measure what we are getting from this? And sometimes it actually amazes. I get amazed when I hear you have implemented this $30 million ERP and you have no clue what you're getting out of it, right? You have no idea how much value you're getting out of it because they don't measure, right? There's no measure of what is actually being returned to them in terms of the value on their investment. So while obviously we don't claim that we can fix all of it, but we can definitely help in that area quite a lot because Apty, again, as a DApp, sitting as an overlay, we have the first-hand visibility into what exactly is happening, which user group, which processes get used more often, and where the usage is breaking, where the utilization is not there as it's supposed to be, right? So again, we call it as the monitoring phase, if you think about it. But that's really the key. You cannot fix or apply a solution to something that you're not measuring. You have to go through proper diagnosis. It's like you're feeling a pain in your knees and you're trying to take a medication for a headache, right? It doesn't help. You might feel like it's helping a little bit because it's a psychological kick that it'll give you, but the reality is you're treating a wrong problem. And you got to think about how to treat the right problem, right? If you want to think about how to treat the right problem, you have to be able to diagnose it properly. And that's where, again, the DApp tools can be very effective and can be very handy in really understanding and measuring where exactly the adoption is.
You can see a really modern tool here that is sitting in front of the user that's trying to do the same thing that we were trying to do back in my example from PwC, just we didn't have the technology back then to put the measurement in front of people on a day-to-day basis.
Exactly.
And the thing that we were finding out, and nothing will have changed, is that realizing the benefit, realizing the ROI, usually has more to do with things that lie completely outside of the system than the system itself. I'll give you an example on that one from finance world. If, say, you are trying to automate accounts payable, you will have, if you've got no technology, you'll get an invoice in, you'll be putting that out in the organization to whoever created the spend in the first place to get that invoice approved. At the time we were doing a lot of things, the idea of three-way matching was coming in. So the idea that says, if you have an order and the price on the order is the same as the price on the invoice, and you have a delivery note, and the quantity on the delivery note is the same as the quantity on the order and the same as the quantity on the invoice, great, pay the invoice. It does not need to go anywhere to be approved. You can get rid of a whole lot of manual effort going on. Now, of course, great, you get the technology that does that. But then if nobody tells the supplier to quote the order number on the invoice, then it does not work.
Exactly.
And that order number on invoice has nothing to do with the ERP you've just implemented. The ERP works beautifully to do the three-way match. It's a human has to go communicate with supplier to do it. If human doesn't communicate with supplier, all you get is a great big error volume going into the old process of sending the invoice out to be approved by someone.
Exactly. Now imagine the same thing if some digital assistant is there on the screen, which has the intelligence to understand, again, who the user is, what process they are following, and again, what invoice number, at least the starting series or whatever that they should be applying to. You can reduce these errors by a significant margin. One of the study that we have done with a customer, and they were exploring an option of implementing a digital adoption platform for their procure to pay and vendor management software. And obviously, sure, we got into the conversations. We really wanted to understand what is the problem that they're trying to solve and what is the benefit that they would get if they solve the problem. And again, the point that I was saying earlier is there's a lot of assumptions, Kevin, that go around in really understanding what the real problem is with these large softwares. And at the same time, the visibility that these companies have into that problem. So we were talking to this large company and they kept saying, oh, we feel like we need a DAP because we feel like a lot of users are struggling to use our system. And we were like, okay, is this your assumption and a feeling, or you have any data to back it up? Sure enough, there's no data, right? So it's their feeling. But obviously the feeling has some backing to it in the sense that, a lot of users are contacting support or maybe telling their managers, hey, we need training one more time and all. So they're going by a little bit dots here and there that some users are not familiar with the system. That's a good start, but that's not really a measure to understand the problem. So in their mind, what they were thinking was, so if we can train everybody one more time, or maybe keep on training them at least twice a year. They got about 9,000 users, I think, that are expected to interact with the system on a regular basis. But they were thinking about, hey, the last time we had to go through this 9,000 user training, it took 3 months to complete, and we spent so much time, energy, and money. And we heard about the dApps that can completely personalize, automate. So we want to use your solution. I'm like, sure enough. But again, the question is, you don't have the proper measure of the problem. You have a sentiment of the problem. And you also didn't think about, let's say, if you do have a dApp and if you started using it, at the end of the day, what true problem you want to solve other than answering your assumptions that people are not using it. And in turn, we had to ask this question, Kevin, and this is very important for some of your audience who might be listening to this and probably dealing with the same problems with their enterprise software. So just because you have a dApp, that doesn't magically solve anything. The dApp itself is also a software solution. So it is also only as good as how it's used.
My next question there that says, what happens if the implementation of the dApp fails?
Exactly. And that's the right question to ask, because any software is only as good as how you're adapting to it, how you're using it, how you're engaging with it. And this is where obviously, we bring the expertise from our side because we've been seeing this for quite a long time. So what we helped this customer to understand was, it's not about your assumptions. Let's actually prove your assumptions, right? So let's measure what is the problem. If you truly think that users are struggling in using the software, you probably are right. But here are the 3 things, 4 things that we can do to actually prove that point. We can put the monitors. We can really understand. You tell us what are your core processes. We'll tell you within about 3 to 4 weeks where the adoption is failing. That's number 1. And number 2, let's say if we fix those adoption problems, or if we don't fix those adoption problems, what is the true ROI value that you are gaining or losing? And that's where the kind of their bells, the thinking bells started ringing. They're like, you know what, you're right. For this company, and the CPO, the chief procurement officer, then started telling us that, you know what, a 5-10% improvement in compliance of our procurement process will result in $20 to $30 million annual savings. Bingo. That's important, right? It's not about just training the users or giving them a little bit more gamified experience in some cases. It's important, but that's itself is not going to solve the problem. What solves the problem is if you can truly understand that These are 3, 4, 5 different things that our users, vendors, internal users, external users are actually doing wrong in our procurement process. And if we can improve the compliance in that process by about 5, 10, 15, 20%, that actually saves a ton of money to the company, right? So that's a direct, maybe revenue comes faster, or your bills get paid faster, or your vendor supplies materials to you faster. So you can start the manufacturing faster. So there's a lot of things that you can do. And when you start thinking about it, the impact from that angle, then having a DAP and how to actually measure the adoption is a no-brainer, Kevin, right? So that's how we were able to make some impact there.
I think when you're doing that, there's a lot of mileage in drawing some kind of benefits map.
Yes.
That you start off by saying, well, we were expecting an ROI. This is made up of maybe half a dozen to a dozen benefits. Okay. Then think about, well, actually, what are the business drivers behind those benefits? What has to change in the business? But then I think you go back a level beyond that and you say, well, hang on, of everything you want to change to drive that benefit through, there are enablers that you can talk about as being process, people, and systems. And your ERP or whatever it is that you're implementing is only one of those 3 enablers. You've got to get the other 2. If you've mapped it all the way back and you can put all of that knowledge you've gained from the benefits map into the DAP, then you're a long way towards solving your problem.
Absolutely. And that's very, very crucial. And everybody starts with the right intention. If you are dealing with any large scale company that engages a matured consulting firm or implementation firm, they genuinely want to do the right thing, right? They want to bring this proper ecosystem of people, technology, and process together. But in reality, what happens is they either do one right, or the emphasis goes on either the system or the process, or sometimes maybe overtraining the people as well in the system may not be ready for the people to actually get engaged the way they want. So again, while there is no one solution that can fix all the problems, you can definitely get to a better place by embracing newer technologies and stuff. And obviously, we are in the era of AI. There's a lot of improvements that are coming. And obviously, we are pioneering our own way of influencing the adoption through AI and stuff. But at the end of the day, to your point, Kevin, right? So you're absolutely right. It's all about what can you do to bring these 3 key ingredients together, because any one of these not being strong or not being there will never give you the results that you're looking for.
Absolutely. Krishna, that has been absolutely fascinating. I think my closing question to you, and Apty or any DAP sounds like a great thing to have, but describe to me a little bit about what sort of customer is this right for? What does your typical customer look like in terms of size?
Sure. So we are basically a platform and a vertical agnostic. I just wanted to put it out there first. But in terms of who is the best customer, who's the ideal customer, where we can actually make an impact. So in the last 4.5 years, Kevin, this is our own learning as well. When we started selling the solution, we learned a lot of lessons that if we just go sell to any mom and pop shop, or let's say a software that has 50 users, 100 users, and they might think they have an adoption problem and they might engage with a DAP. Sure, you can engage with a DAP, but that's not really where we can add value. Where we can really add value is if there is a company that has at least 1,000 employees or more, meaning no matter what you're doing, you have a decent size of employees, that's when you have to think about proper processes in place and proper ecosystem for users to do what they're supposed to do and have any of this enterprise software. So we have what we call as a North Star of our applications that are about 16 different software categories. But any company that has at least 1,000 employees or more and have a couple of these North Star applications, the ERPs and the HCMs, the HR applications and stuff, and then have complex business processes that span across departments. And that's where we can actually add a lot of value.
So we're not talking small, medium business here. We're talking more into upper mid-market, going into corporates.
Exactly. That's where the solution can be sticky, and then we can actually make a huge difference there.
Okay, brilliant, brilliant. So if that's you, and you've got an implementation problem, have a good look at what Apty is doing, have a good look at what Krishna, and no, we're not saying that Apty is the right answer. There are other answers out there, but this is certainly something that's making a difference in an area that I've seen problems for longer than I care to remember. Let's hope that this is finally putting that problem of why does ERP not deliver the value it's supposed to bed once and for all. Krishna, thank you for being this week's guest on the Grow CFO Show.
Thanks, Kevin. Thanks for having me.